And periodically, I will try to react as Kat would react while you're talking. And you see if you can pick it out.
I will be able to. So it's not a reflection on me. It's a reflection on you.
A reflection on Kat.
Yeah.
She's not here. Blame her.
Welcome back to another episode of 1980s Now, a weekly examination of the importance of 1980s pop culture and its influence today. My name is Will, and joining me as always...
How do you say this?
Huh.
Yeah?
Well, he always joins me. My friend and co-host, John.
Hi there?
Yeah. Oh, you left the space.
It's so weird to not say Kat first.
We got to add Kat in later. So... yeah, Kat's not here today. She has a definitely more important thing to do today. And so she is with us in spirit always, and she'll be back next week. Meanwhile, I don't want to forget to remind you folks listening, or you folk, because you talk to the audience member as a single person. You folk, I don't want to forget to remind you.
Perfect.
That in addition to his co-hosting duties, check out John on his own podcast, Gen X Grown Up, and YouTube channel.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, anyway, on today's show, Kat is definitely what did someone say? She's not the soul, the heart. I mean, she's those things for sure.
She's the glue.
The glue. There you go.
The glue. How will we make it through this show? Well, I'm 5 minutes in and I'm lost.
Yeah, and I'm bored.
Well, thanks.
Let's just wrap it up right now. Except she does she thanks the patrons. And so what are we going to do about that now? Oh, we're screwed.
I don't know.
All right.
Hey. Pull one from last week or something. I don't know.
All right. Well, look, here's the good news, okay? Because it's a bummer that Kat's not here. But the good news is just you and me, a couple of dudes hanging out.
Bro down.
So, we could talk about dude stuff. And so on today's show, in the very least, John and I are going to chat about our fictional role models.
I thought you were going to say manscaping.
Well, I said among other things. I do have questions about your balls. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We will get to that.
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Excellent.
This episode is brought to you by Smooth Balls. What's that thing?
Is that the name of a business?
It is. We used to get approached by something like that to do advertisement. Like Smooth My Balls or something. They might not be around anymore.
Lawnmower 2.0.
Because I did used to hear them in other podcasts. You do hear Manscaped still.
Oh.
Yeah. I could do a commercial for those because I think I've already gone through one. It doesn't work anymore because it just tore it up.
Oh.
I need a heavier duty model.
You got a coarse front lawn, huh? Okay.
Yes, my cabbage patch is blooming.
Kind of wiry.
There you go. I realize you know what it is. Since Kat's not here to, lovingly and supportingly laugh at our truly terrible jokes. I'm realizing how unfunny we truly are.
You have to laugh at one another. You have to help me out, Will.
Yeah. And so with regard to our fictional male role models, though, I was remembering that, in April of, had to look it up because I didn't remember exactly, but in April of 2022, so April of last year, we talked about masculinity as represented in 80s films. It was an episode where we also had an interview at the end of the episode where I chatted with Vernon Wells, who, is truly, he was the epitome of, certainly one of of machismo in the 1980s movies, because he always played a bad guy who you wouldn't want to fuck around with. But anyway, so this is distinct from that. And we could talk about why that is, I think, in a little bit. Anyway, before that, though, we're going to review current news stories related to 1980s media, including, as every week, we try to tie our news stories somehow into our topic so that, the news informs the topic and the topic can reflect back on the news or use the news. Mm-hmm. This week, we're going to get an update on 3 Arnold Schwarzenegger sequel films that we were promised. Certainly in the last 10 years or so, we've been promised them. More recently, even the last couple of years. And he's a guy we talked about when we talked about machismo. Also, we're going to talk about how Dana Carvey rejected Robin Williams. And we're going to get an update on the Ghostbusters sequel. And we've got a code name to refer to it. Anyway, there's time codes in the show notes if you'd like to skip around. Hey, before that, I'm going to make an announcement. Keep an ear out. Because talking about, male role models and sort of the tropes of 1980s films, TV shows, etc. This week, I'm also going to be speaking with Sky McDonald about her newly released book, The Not So Nice Girl. It just came out a couple of weeks ago, end of May. I think it was May 30th. It's set in 1986, and it reads like a rom-com of that era. And so there's plenty of things in there that will remind you of your own youth. Certainly it did mine and some of the experiences I had. But I'd be curious to ask her even about this idea about, because, she has sort of distinct male types, and they have to be, pulled from the 1980s. Because I think if she said it today, I think certainly things would be somewhat different. But I'd be curious what her thoughts are about that.
Like Breakfast Club style archetypes, is that kind of thing? You have you have the jock and you have the nerd and you have that kind of thing, or
yeah, so yes.
Is it more esoteric than that? Is it more okay?
No,
yeah.
I think to some extent, like this, the main character so far, and I haven't finished the book, but the main character so far feels like it could have been played by John Cusack if it actually was a film that came out.
All right.
That kind of
$2.
Charming guy. He's a little nebbishy, but
aloof.
He's got the potential to woo the girl.
Yeah.
Well,
he's John Cusack, of course.
All right. So now I was just stalling this whole time to make sure Kat wasn't really going to show up because she said she couldn't make it, but I thought maybe it was a ruse. I was thinking about that IT Crowd episode because I know you watch it too. The one where Jen spends a day. She's what's his name? Matt Berry. What's his character's name? I don't know. Anyway, there's that episode where Jen's out of the office. So what they do, they have this list of all these things they've wanted to do, but they can't do because she's around.
And they're chipping a golf ball into his mouth.
And he keeps missing and breaking things.
Don't worry, I won't hit your teeth. And he smashes a window behind him. Like they're demolishing the IT office. Yeah. Because, I think
the first thing they do is take off their pants, right? And they're just in their boxers for the whole remainder of it.
So you're saying this is going to be literally a while the cat is away, the dudes will play.
Oh, John. Yes.
Yeah.
Why didn't I think of that?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Except it's spelled K-A-T. I called it. You were meant the animal. You meant the animal.
It's with a K. Exactly right. I did, and now you made it even better. You yes-anded me.
Yes.
Perfect, Will.
Yes,
Thank
and
you.
I'm right, John, and you agree. Yes, and you agree. So look, this is what I have here. I have a list here of the from Watch Mojo of the top 10 sexiest women of the 1980s.
Oh, yes!
I wouldn't want to talk about this in front of Kat.
Do you think she wouldn't be able to agree or disagree, or do you think you just want it's a dude talk?
She would, but you know what, quite honest, look, I'll be honest with you because I'm always honest with you. I was racking my brain. Like, what could we talk about that I wouldn't feel comfortable talking about with Kat? Or if she weren't here, she wouldn't feel like, oh, there's something I really wanted to say about that, Right. There was nothing. There really is nothing.
Gotcha. Right. She didn't miss out on some great commentary because she might not have as much to talk about these hot ladies of the 80s. I got it.
Right.
Okay.
In the male role models was the best thing only because and look, I don't doubt Kat has some male role models because I know she loved a lot of the stuff that we loved from the 1980s. Huge fan of the Dukes of Hazzard and shows of that era. So anyway, that's as close as you can get. I love talking to Kat. I love her perspective. And she'd have a point on this anyway. Maybe I shouldn't even do this, but I'm going to run through these anyway. And this is shit, then we'll cut this too. I have a feeling the whole show's going to be garbage. But look, let's just see what we got here.
It's going to be welcome to the show. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, it's going to be edited down. Just the good parts. That's all that's left.
It's going to be the announcements. That's it. Hey, a quick announcement. The show is over. Let me end. All right, here you go. Number 10, Morgan Fairchild.
Too prissy.
Yeah, I don't know. She's definitely beautiful, but for me, it's going to have to be some combination of beauty and attraction. And then attraction is just some kind of like animal level lust or something, like you desire.
You're right. There's something there. Right. And look, this is the perfect topic to talk about with Kat because I would be uncomfortable explaining why I don't think Morgan Fairchild does it for me, for Kat. But now, even though I know she's going to listen, I know she's not here to judge me in real time. So she can internalize and whatever. But yes, something about Morgan Fairchild just looks like uncanny valley. Like it's not quite right. Are her eyes too far apart or too close? Or is her nose too small or too big? I don't know what it is. She has a very distinctive look and a very attractive look, but I wouldn't even put her on a list of hot ladies of the 80s either. Yeah.
I hadn't thought about that. She's almost too symmetrical, too smooth. She looks like, I don't think she's had plastic surgery,
sharp
but she
angles.
looks like she has. Yeah. This is going to, look, we might as well just be as sexist as we want because nobody's listening. It's just you and me.
That's fine.
And if Kat's not on, none of the women that listen are listening either. So.
Well, that's fine. So no one to be offended.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
cool.
So here.
It's a show for us, Will.
This is,
right?
Yeah.
It's us.
And this is real, for us, by us. This is really a misogynistic here or sexist, I think. I don't like how she does her makeup. It's just too much makeup. I'm a guy who likes just natural beauty. I'm a guy who doesn't, I like just, you don't have to wear makeup for me, John. You specifically, John. You don't need any plastic surgery, any
Thank you.
augmentations, any implants. I take you as you come. That's the truly most beautiful. This is a terrible episode. What is this? What are we doing here?
No.
What do you think about that?
I'm going to cancel my scheduled BBL then. I'm not going to go forward with that.
See, we need Kat because she wouldn't know what that stood for.
I know but it's still great because she's listening and she doesn't know right now listening. Right. And she's going to go, what is that? Right. And she'll have to pause and go to Google and be embarrassed. And then she'll message us. It's perfect. It is a show for us, but we're going to get the benefit later when she hears it.
So maybe we're really doing this show for Kat. That's how we keep the spark alive here. We know Kat's listening. Okay, good.
Yes. That's what I'm always doing when she's here or not.
So you put off your bubble.
I'm gonna cancel my BBL schedule.
He's doing it right now. I can see him typing something. Hey, number 9 is Brooke Shields.
What are your thoughts?
I think she's almost in the Morgan Fairchild category for a different reason. I mean, doesn't have that angular look. Morgan Fairchild is beautiful, but she doesn't have that crafted in a lab look like Morgan Fairchild. But she's just something about her that I feel I don't connect to.
So look, we've established what we're doing here. You don't have to keep backpedaling and going, now beautiful, but ... Right. We get, right?
Right.
Brooke Shields in the same way, very angular, very attractive. Her face has always looked young to me, like younger than her years. But the thing I can't get over with Brooke Shields is the unibrow.
Oh.
The heavy, super dark. And it's got to be augmented with makeup because no one has, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, that and being a model and an actress, it always surprised me that they didn't say, "Hey, let's tame the mane a little bit. Let's do something with those." They're as tall as her eyes, and I was like, okay,
tall as her
they
eyes.
are. Look at a picture. It's there's the drawing chart when you draw a face, like you draw an oval, you put the eyes are in the middle and whatever. Well, on that chart for Brooke Shields, the eyes and the brows, same height.
I know that's one of those Da Vinci measurements, right? The golden, whatever.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
I actually like a heavy eyebrow myself on a lady. Didn't notice that they connected necessarily what you're saying. So that doesn't bother me, but yeah, I don't know. And two, you said about she always looked young. It was controversial when she first came on the scene and started getting roles because she started very young, and some of the roles she had, were I don't know, maybe she was too young to play some of those roles, and she took a break and she went to Princeton and she came back and she started to work again. But anyway, so she's older than we are, but she always, I agree with you. It's because I think a lot of times she was in those films. She probably shouldn't have been. What was that Blue Lagoon or whatever?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I think of her always in that film because in that film, I don't know how old she was, clearly very young, but even her character was just like finishing puberty. Right. Like she was so young and she shouldn't have been in that situation, but whatever it was, a shipwreck. I don't know what it was, but yeah.
How did that movie even get made? That's a weird movie.
Does anybody still watch that movie? You can't watch that movie. You can't, it's too uncomfortable.
Number 8 is Kim Basinger. Basinger.
Say it however you like.
Yeah, we could probably tear through these because I'm going to say, same. Physically attractive. I don't know.
I'm curious to see as you go through this list because the first two, Brooke Shields, better than Morgan Fairchild.
Mm-hmm.
Kim Basinger, better than Brooke Shields. So maybe you're working your way up because Kim Basinger is less of all those things, less manufactured, less super symmetrical, less angular, less youthful looking. Mm-hmm. I don't mean that negatively. I mean, yes, childish looking, I guess is what I'm saying, kind of how Brooke Shields was always young. So so you're working your way up to, can't wait to see what number 1 is. I'm going to have to take a breather.
I think and I didn't create this list. This is from Watch Mojo. Okay. But I'll throw in what I think should have been on the list or not. But, I think for me, what it's coming down to, talking about male, I don't know if this is ultimately talking about male role models or fictional male role models. We're going to be talking about, how we identify with certain traits or aspire to, have similar traits to some of the folks that we admired in the 1980s or before. Many of them before that, but from our lives. And I think what I'm realizing is, however I grew up or was informed, I'm looking for an emotional connection. So unlike maybe identifying with these, the machismo, the characters, the macho characters of the earlier 1980s and certainly throughout most of the 1980s, this would be a more feminine, sort of a more, what we consider a more feminine trait is that part of my being attracted to them is feeling I can connect with them. And a lot of them, and maybe it's an aspect of their beauty, but Kim Basinger is getting closer, I think, because there's something about her personality too, that in her films where she seems more natural and grassroots, kind of earthy and...
Oh, I agree. And I'm willing to state that probably fully 70% of my attitude toward these actresses has to do with the roles I have seen them in, not how much I know about their actual personalities. So just serendipitously, whatever roles you happen to get, if I connect with the role, I probably find the actress more appealing.
Michelle Pfeiffer is number 7.
Oh, that's working. That's working. I think she is lovely. She's on the bubble between classic beauty and a more natural beauty. And she has a striking eye line. And I always think of her as Isabeau in
Lady Hawk.
Lady Hawk, exactly. Yeah. Soundtrack by Alan Parsons, just FYI. But in that, where she is in a role where she is a stronger woman, she's dealing with adversity, and Michelle Pfeiffer, that film especially. If I think of her in that role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. We're getting there. I don't know. She's gorgeous, and something about her personality I find very attractive. Number 6 is Heather Locklear. Nothing against Heather Locklear. She's beautiful. I just never found her that, she wasn't my cup of tea.
She's a knockout. She's very modelly, super symmetrical. I mean, the Ford company is looking for her, right? I mean, that's the look they're pulling for.
I watched her on her shows that she was on. Love TJ Hooker, but no, didn't do it for me. Number 5 is Phoebe Cates. Now I know why she made this list, probably. Yeah, but other than Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where she bears her naked breasts, that in Gremlins, I can't think of another thing she's appeared in. So, but again, physically beautiful. I don't know that I have enough experience with her, sort of even on fictionally to feel she's doing it for me.
It's definitely the roles are taking effect here because objectively beautiful young lady. I have no particular affinity for her necessarily. I think it's because I don't have a connection. I don't have an avenue in. This is a person not in my world unless I have a role that I relate to that I connect with. Yeah. Probably not going to do it for me. So, yeah.
I realize this is, as we get closer to the end here, I'm realizing that's what it's coming down to. Like you're saying, the first time we saw them in movies or the first time they made an impression or the thing that made the most impression on us is the one that sort of stays with us.
I think so. Yeah.
Number 4, Vanessa Williams. Now, she didn't do a whole lot of acting in the 1980s. Of course, she's most well known for being the first African-American woman to be Miss America.
Miss America, right? Yeah.
A title she lost for something that wouldn't lose anything for anybody today. She apparently had posed for some nude photos prior to that. It's just, it's shocking that a beauty contest that lauds people for their beauty. And let's face it, they wear those bikinis just because they can't show nipples on TV.
It clearly... It's objectifying you in the first place to see how, just symmetrically, perfectly attractive you are. And if you then had previously taken advantage of your beauty, well, then you're disqualified. That was BS. Yeah,
that was dumb. I think most of the 1980s she spent singing, really. She was certainly in some films and TV shows and more so in the 90s. Gorgeous woman.
I put her on like Kim Basinger par myself.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think she's ranks higher to me than most of the folks on this list, but yeah. Okay. All right. Number 3, Kelly LeBrock.
Sold.
That's it. End of the list.
You may have some more on the list, but Kelly LeBrock is right near the top.
I agree.
And it's because of Weird Science. It's because of that role where she is taking control of the situation with her femininity and with her sexuality. She's bowing to nobody. That's her identity. I mean, she's an artificial person or whatever, but still in that role, she was powerful and it just struck a chord and other things simultaneously.
What, did it strike a chord or other things, or did you strike some of those things over and over?
Right. I think it was an F sharp. Sproing. Yeah, F sharp.
And people were knocking on the door. John, stop striking it.
I'm watching Weird Science. Leave me alone.
I agree for all those reasons. And I guess maybe we're attracted to strong women. There was something about, she's like sexy Mary Poppins in that movie. She's got all of the power. She's magical. I can see now even John Hughes thinking that, right? That the boys,
sexy Mary Poppins.
Gary and Wyatt need something. So she appears, she does other things, and then she disappears. And she goes, presumably off to help somebody else. And we see her at the end in this little tag, teaching gym at the high school now. Physically beautiful and something on a base level again. All the reasons you said, plus there's just some animal magnetism, I guess.
100%.
Number 2, Madonna. Now, I don't agree she should be higher than Kelly LeBrock, but she's the number 2 on Watch Mojo's list.
I don't know what Watch Mojo was drinking, but I wouldn't even put her on the list. Well, I think it's because, again, it's the personality avenue. Like, objectively beautiful. Look at the album cover for True Blue, right? It's a model pose, right? Yeah. She's looking up to the sky and just the beautiful features. It's all there, but I never cared for the commercial personality of Madonna. Her music was okay, not my favorite. But something about it always felt a little bit highbrow and a little not for the common person. And that's what I attribute to Madonna. Yeah. She elevated herself out of the range of who I would consider attractive people.
She did it to herself.
She did. Take that, Madonna. I'm sure she's torn up about it.
Yeah, probably. I think I disagree with you. And only because, my first exposure to her, I'm thinking about, like you said, album covers. So her first Madonna and then Like a Virgin, seeing her dancing on MTV and, I don't know. And I want to say something that I think maybe even sounds worse than what we've been saying so far.
Go for it.
But Kat's not here.
Okay.
And I think to say it maybe in a way that sounds more palatable, it's like, and tied to the Kelly LeBrock thing is now, look, at the time I didn't realize this, but I think I was attracted to the women and the characters that seemed strong, powerful, and in all areas, including sexually, like sexually independent. I remember when we were kids, as is true today, this idea of, for lack of a better phrase, or a phrase you'll know, it's sort of a terrible turn of phrase, but slut shaming. That was a thing when we were kids. It's true today. I was never anybody who bought into that idea. I thought anybody who felt as amorous as I do at 13, 14 years old, you're all right. I get it. And also, hey, if you're willing to make out with me, am I going to judge you? I mean, what's this? So
God bless you for doing it.
And Madonna seemed like that, again, sort of, again, that was part of her brand, was being that, and certainly later as her career evolved, that the person who was, strong and sexually independent, or I don't know if that's the right phrase.
All right. So was that, there's still one more on your list. Is that right?
Yeah.
So before you tell me the last one on the list,
Yep.
Because it connects directly to this, and over on Gen X Grown Up, we just did an episode about the 40th anniversary of War Games. And so Ali Sheedy in that film does all of the things that you just said. And we talked about it on the show there, where she is aggressively trying to seduce Matthew Broderick's character certainly throughout the third of the film, right? She's making him very uncomfortable. She's like trapping him in his room by putting her legs on either side of the bed so he can't get by, and he feels really awkward. Yeah. But it made her all the more attractive because she owned her sexuality. She knew what she wanted, and she was going for it unashamedly. And that's something that, especially women in the 80s, would be slut shamed for, you are supposed to be shy and demure and wait until a man comes for you. And Ali Sheedy in that film did not. She's the opposite of that.
Right.
And for all the same reasons that we talked about why Madonna resonated with you, and I think Ali Sheedy in that film for me is that attractive is fine, but attractive is not enough, right? They talk about, you look great, but what are you on the inside? And that might be trite, but it's true. It's if there's no substance there you can connect with. Looks only get you so far.
So maybe the one thing that's sort of a through line to all these is having a strong sense of self, self-confidence, identity. You know who you are, you're not ashamed of who you are. So whether that's being sexually, because you're sexually experienced, or that's the only thing I'm focusing on right now, so words are escaping me. Whatever it is, maybe that seems right. I mean, kind of a thing. And not to say anything on any other characters, because there's other reasons, or
right.
women that we mentioned. But.
Or on the flip side, if you have a character who is not sexually active or even a virgin, but isn't ashamed of that. Right. The same kind of thing would work. It's just that you're not like, I don't want to tell anybody, but just be who you are. Yeah. Fly your flag. And that is so attractive. Yeah. That doubles whatever physical attractiveness you have.
Yeah. Because you remind me, a lot of, the Madonnas and Kelly LeBrock's aside, oftentimes the characters represented on film that I was most attracted to are those girl next doors that were just, like you're describing Ali Sheedy almost, except maybe it doesn't have to be as forward even. Like Boof in Teen Wolf, Susan Ursitti. I thought, why doesn't he want to be with her instead of this other,
What's he thinking?
Yeah. So, but again, there it comes down to the idea it's a strong, confident person, I guess, in whoever you are. Yeah. Number one is Christy Brinkley.
Doesn't beat out Kelly LeBrock for me.
Yeah, me neither.
Very modelly again. Very almost too perfect, too angular, piercing gaze.
She did what to the who?
You heard me.
Arrest her.
She has a piercing gaze. Gaze.
Okay.
Let me make sure I'm clear.
That's a hate crime.
No. I would never accuse her of that. Model gorgeous. Again, the Ford company's looking for her. But other than, I guess, Vacation, I wouldn't have seen her do anything really that would give me a personality to attach her beauty to and be able to elevate or diminish it. So
yeah, I agree with you. But for wanting to go swimming with her in that scene in the pool, this is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy.
Right. And that's just pure animalistic basal urge. That's not actually observing the beauty necessarily. So I would dismiss that. I wouldn't bypass it. I would go for it, but I would not I would dismiss it as being a way to define her beauty or attractiveness.
I think missing from this list, and for all the reasons that we said should be considered, Rebecca De Mornay. In Risky Business, I was in love. She could have all my furniture. Sean Young, in anything I saw her in, was it Blade Runner or No Way Out?
Sure.
And instead of Heather Locklear, I would have swapped in Heather Thomas.
Heather Thomas. Sure. Heather Thomas, much more girl next door, I would argue.
Yeah. Girl next door who was sunbathing in a bikini. Because I had that poster, as I mentioned before. And actually, I did have a girl next door that was suntanning in a bikini.
Really? How did you get anything done?
That is for another story, John. As
Fair
you say
enough.
oftentimes,
Okay.
it's another story. We'll save it for another.
It is.
All right. Hey.
There's always tomorrow.
I don't know what that was, but you know what? I'm going to add something in that says, since Kat's not here, it's time for us to, and I'll press the button. Oh, something like that. I was trying to find that right before we got on, and so I Googled like woman pleasure sound or something like that, and the things that came up was nothing I could use and feel comfortable about.
Woman pleasure sound. Oh, chocolate. What are the sounds going to be?
Just like, oh, ooh. I don't know. But what came up, the files, like the top 5 files, and I didn't go past that, were like woman orgasm sounds.
Oh, my.
And most of them said some variation of that. And I thought, well, maybe one of those will work. But the most alarming thing to me about those files were they were like each 10 minutes long. And I suddenly felt very inferior as a man.
So was it a compilation of sounds, or was it one sample that ran 10 minutes long? In which case, I also feel quite inferior.
I didn't click. I didn't want to click. I didn't want to know.
I know what not to search for.
Yeah, don't do that. But something was in there earlier. All right. Hey, let's move on with the show and get caught up on 1980s news. Hey, during an extensive interview with Hollywood Reporter, Arnold Schwarzenegger gave an update, or several updates, on potential sequels to 3 beloved 1980s movies, some of which are franchises. First,
Right.
James Hibbard, the interviewer, asked Schwarzenegger whether the Terminator franchise is done, noting, quote, "It feels done." End quote. But per Schwarzenegger, he said, "The franchise is not done. I'm done. I got the message loud and clear that the world wants to move on with a different theme. The first 3 movies were great. 5 and 6 were just not well written." End quote. I feel done with Terminator. I mean, and maybe it's because the last, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4 films have sucked.
I'm a Terminator apologist.
Oh,
I'll
okay.
even defend Genesis if I have to.
Okay.
Not because it's great, but
Yeah.
because I have so much love for the Terminator franchise that I developed around the first one and second one. And even the third one, which I would argue
that's the worst.
the worst of the first 3, but it has elements that are really cool that didn't get executed on perfectly. But I think we're beyond the figuring out how to explain why the Terminator looks like he's aged. I mean, they did explain it several times in different ways. They found ways to get around it. They had him living there in his whatever, but they tried it with the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which was an interesting way to explore that universe, but it was missing the spectacle that you're accustomed to with Terminator films as a series.
I didn't watch that. Was there a Terminator in it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Summer Glau, I think is her name, the actress that was in Firefly. She played a Terminator the whole way through. And so against type, rather than being a big, buff, heroic guy, she's a very thin, like a rail thin, athletic young woman, but she did not look like a machine, right? She was slim, and no one expected her to be. It's like the Bionic Woman, right? No one expects her to be able to run that fast or lift things or do whatever, and she could.
Huh. Well, unlike you, I mean, I've seen them all. I'm always hopeful they'll be good. I actually did like Genesis in the sense that conceptually it was a really cool idea. Let's see what actually happened in the future. Yep. I think for the most part, that's probably my next favorite one after the James Cameron ones. 3, I thought was terrible.
Really?
And then actually the most recent one wasn't too bad either, where they, that's maybe a better sequel to Terminator 2.
That was supposed to be.
Than any others have been.
I think Cameron was basically saying this is the third film, forget the old third film. And
right.
That was the hope, but I mean, we can't, you can't unring that bell.
I didn't look it up for our chat today, but I did see something recently that James Cameron is interested in coming back and writing and directing the next one and try to get it back on track. But I don't even know if that could do it for me. But
I would be there. All you have to do is put Bigfoot or Terminator in a movie, and I'm there. So sold.
Jung, 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 jung. He's there.
Yep.
Next, Hibbert asked Schwarzenegger whether there was any update on Triplets. If you remember, Triplets was the in development sequel to Twins that Ivan Reitman was really excited about and attached to direct until he unfortunately died just last year. With regard to that, Schwarzenegger said, Jason Reitman fucked it up.
not to put too fine a point on it.
He continues, Jason Reitman literally stopped the project when his father died. Jason said, I never liked the idea and put a hold on it, end quote. If you remember, of course, the original Twins was released in 1988, starring Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito. They were both set to return for this triplets, and Tracy Morgan, who replaced Eddie Murphy, was also set to star in the film. I don't know. That's fine. I'm fine with that. Whatever. Twins is good, but I don't know. I don't need more of it.
Of these in the article, this is the one I least care if it happens.
And finally, with regard to a long-promised third film in the Conan series, Schwarzenegger said, it's been pending for the last 10 years. Frederick Malmberg owns the rights. He comes to me and says, oh, I have a deal with Netflix. And then we ask Netflix, and they say they don't know anything about it. The story's there. There are directors who want to do it, but Malmberg has the rights, and until he sells the rights for one or two movies or for the whole franchise, there's nothing you can do about it, end quote. Yeah, that was been teased for a long time. I'm not so familiar with the Conan the stories except for the films, but I know there is a story, maybe it's based on the comics that have since come, or maybe it's based on the original books, but where there's an older Conan character, King Conan, and he was supposed to play, he's the appropriate age now to play that character, and it sounded brilliant, and it was going to be a series, much like we have a lot of these series that can really flesh out stories. But
two things about this that make me really excited, and probably the one I most hope, even above Terminator, I hope this would happen for Conan, and that is, and I mentioned a few times on the show where I've talked about, I love the trend of coming back to a franchise 20 or 30 years later with the actors the right age to have aged the characters and see what they're doing now. And so I don't want to reboot. I don't want to remake. I don't want to, let's pretend everybody's young and de-age them. And he even says in this article, the thing that most excites me about what Schwarzenegger sees for a Conan film is the model from Unforgiven. The Clint Eastwood Western is my all-time favorite Western film, not on its own, but because it takes effectively the whole career of Clint Eastwood playing this cowboy hero and looking at what his life is like in his twilight years. And it is just, it's impeccable. It is such a good, it's heart-wrenching. And why? Because we're older and we get it. We get what it's like to have this life in your youth and then to have to come back and either answer for it or atone for it or to pay for it. And to put Conan in that spot, oh man, fantastic.
I thought this was interesting. Thinking about what kicked off Schwarzenegger's, really his career. I didn't know this, but the author asks him, or says to Schwarzenegger, you've described your dad's abuse as fuel for self-improvement. You became so big and so strong that nobody could ever hurt you again. But you can't do that to a kid and have it only result in positive motivation. It had to have some negative impact on you too. Schwarzenegger says, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's like in Conan when James Earl Jones as Thulsa Doom says, why do you want to kill me? I created you. He killed Conan's parents. He created the fire in his belly, which is why Conan became the warrior, became the king. He was the spring well of my strength. So I can look at it in a negative way and dwell on that, or I can go, but the good thing is, was there anything negative left over? Maybe, I don't know. And thinking about male role models, and this again, we're not talking about machismo because we did that once before, but the cycle that, is created, and not to say that Schwarzenegger is a bad father or abusive by any means, but the fact that he felt the need to become this mountain of muscle is because someone hurt him.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly a defense mechanism kicking in there. I reading between the lines, I think you could probably surmise that there is some negative remaining impact on him, but not something being such a positive force that Schwarzenegger kind of always has been, and really more has become in his later years. I could see him not wanting to dwell on it though. I mean, it's going to leave a lasting impact.
Yeah, agreed. And just a small plug for our buddy John Walsh, the author. He's got a Conan the Barbarian official story of the film book coming out in August. And we'll probably talk to him. There you go.
There we go. Had to plug some celebrity you knew, the author John Walsh. Well done.
I thought for sure Vernon Wells earlier was gonna get me a yellow card.
Yeah, well, only because I missed it.
We should score this. All right, there you go. One me, one you. All right. Hey, also reported by the Hollywood Reporter, Dana wouldn't let Robin appear in Saturday Night Live sketch. So if you were a fan of Saturday Night Live in the 1980s, like me,
sure, who wasn't?
I don't think I missed any. We had this thing in my family where when I was too young to stay up for it, which was a good portion of the 80s, we would record it on our VHS or before that our beta, and we would watch it on Sunday morning after breakfast, or with donuts or whatever. But again, if you were a fan, you remember when Dana Carvey was on. because one of the most, I guess, outstanding or sort of memorable characters he created was the church lady. You know, that elderly,
Isn't that special?
pious woman, Enid Strict. She debuted in 1986 during his first season on the sketch show. And she was a hit. She was huge. Yeah, I remember in elementary school we were doing all those quotes.
Right.
What was the other ones? Who could it be?
Satan? Right. And it was one of those, as you said, out of the gate winners. I remember probably that year or the next year, there were already T-shirts and hats and bumper stickers and stuff with those catchphrases because Carvey just epitomized a stereotype that had not really been represented by a single entity on TV before, and he did it so well, you know? Like everybody knows that person, but they didn't have a commonality to just cling to, and now they're like, that's her, the church lady, right? I knew those people.
And suddenly those people were like, I'm seen, finally. Yes, Hollywood is filled with sinners.
They get it. They finally get it, yeah.
So during a recent episode of his Fly on the Wall podcast, which he co-hosts with fellow SNL alum David Spade.
Stupid celebrity podcast. Get out of the space.
I actually did listen to this one for a few episodes because
you're part of the problem, Will. You can't listen to them.
I'm teaching the AI. Conceptually, or at least the initial concept that they were going to speak to folks that were involved in Saturday Night Live. So maybe they have done that entirely so far. So if you were a host or a writer, producer, actor, they may not be sticking to that entirely yet, but it's been overwhelmingly, and that's what drew my interest. Anyway, on that show, Carvey recently revealed that one of the times that Oscar-winning actor Robin Williams hosted the show, he called Carvey and asked him to be included in a church lady sketch. But Carvey said he had to decline, which was difficult for him.
How could you do that? How could you look? Anything I'm working on, if one of my heroes comes up and goes, "Hey, I want to be a part of one of these," and as we get through the article, we understand you'll explain why, but those reasons don't hold water for me. I'm like, I can't believe he didn't take a shot.
Yeah, And you remind me that, so they're both from San Francisco. They both started there in the comedy clubs. Robin Williams, I'm guessing, was a little bit older than Dana Carvey, only because, maybe not. Dana Carvey was appearing on TV shows in small parts early in the 1980s, like earlier than we sort of knew him to be Dana Carvey. And certainly Robin Williams was a big hit at the late end of the 1970s with Mork and had been a hit in the comedy clubs. So I'm wondering if he wasn't a hero in that regard because they were peers. It was contemporary. So it'd be a better analogy would be a fellow podcaster.
Gotcha.
I don't know, but for Carvey, for us, I agree with you. For Carvey, he said, "quote He was a really good friend, but he really wanted to do church chat." And this was in the early days. This was my golden ticket, and I was very careful. I thought if Robin got so excited, I was just afraid of it. It was heartbreaking, but we got past that, and we were friends. But in those days, your character, was very precious. I wanted to keep it quasi-real in a sense. I agree with you. There's lots of holes in this.
Yeah. Even if it went off the rails and Robin Williams took over the sketch, how memorable would that be? And how much more would people talk about the church lady than they already were? I can't imagine a scenario. Robin Williams, as manic as he was and as crazy brilliant as he was still respectful of other comics. He would not have damaged the sketch or damaged the character. I just feel like it was Dana Carvey. Look, he was, who knows? I don't know how long this was into his run on SNL. Maybe he's just afraid. He didn't want to, chase the golden goose. Yeah. He was afraid, if he tried to make it too funny, he's going to go over the edge and he'll lose the magic that he had because he got so lucky out of the gate. Yeah.
So Carvey started in 86, and I looked it up. Robin Williams hosted it 3 times, but the first time was before Carvey was on.
So that doesn't count.
And then he hosted it. So he hosted it in November of 86 and January of 88. So it could have been either of those 2 times. Okay. Carvey didn't specify. So it could have been the first year he did it, or he'd been 2 years into his, only 2 years into his run there.
Now, if you were Carvey in that situation, let's assume it's the 2008. You're 2 years in. Let's give Dana Carvey the benefit of the doubt, right? Mm-hmm. Put yourself in those shoes, and Robin Williams wants to be on your sketch. Can you find a reason not to?
I agree with you. And even in our small way here, and I think part of it's just a sense of maturity. So I don't know how old Dana Carvey was then, but because he's older than we are. But in the 80s, at that time he was on the show, maybe he was in his 30s or so, or late 20s. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I feel like earlier in my life, and certainly when I did theater, when I was starting out, in the 90s and things since, I think I was more vulnerable to feeling envious of people or concerned that they would somehow steal my spotlight or my
upstaged
thunder or even
you
my
something.
idea. Yes.
Yeah.
Now I have Gen X grown-ups host on my show, and I don't worry about it at all. And it's not because he's a lesser talent than I am, which is true also, but it's just because
Wait a minute.
if he finally gets his shit together, I'll be happy for him.
I was about to be super complimentary and nice to you, and now I don't know if I can get there.
Take two.
I don't know if I can get there.
No, but now you know what? I learned this from you, John, because you invited me on your show before I invited you on my show.
That's right.
And you said, I look for folks to help, to collaborate with, we lift all boats kind of thing.
Yep.
And I remember you said that. And then that's what all my efforts to find other folks to do that kind of similar thing too. I don't feel threatened anymore. I feel like the better we all do, any of us does is great for everybody. And
that's what I was going to reference. I mean, so I'm trying to map myself. I don't know whether I'm Carvey or Robin Williams here. It doesn't matter. The point is, when I had you on my show years ago, before we first met, I respected you. I respected your show, never having met you, just from the caliber of work that you did. And I'm like, I was not afraid to have you on the show. I'm like, oh no, he's going to see what a train wreck we are. No, I'm like, I want that guy. I want that guy in my orbit. I want to be in that guy's orbit. I want to be in the circles where that is happening. And so I guess it's not quite a direct analogy, Matt, because Dana Carvey was going to be Dana Carvey no matter what happened with Robin Williams, but game recognized game. If you see someone else that can elevate you, as you said, don't run from it. You got to use it. You got to use it. Take advantage of it. Jump in.
Yeah.
Forge ahead, because that's a missed opportunity. I can't imagine a scenario where it would have damaged that character, and it probably was due to his youth, a malady that you and I no longer suffer.
Yeah. Right. It's a little hard to have that young perspective anymore. But
yes, not a problem.
I agree with you. And in the very least, the alchemy, that would have happened between the two of them on stage.
Yeah.
Carvey might have learned something about the character that he did not otherwise see,
That's a great insight. I didn't even consider. But yeah, who knows what could have come out of it? It could have grown the character. Robin Williams could have introduced another catchphrase that would have stuck forever and elevated the character. You don't know.
Right.
Road not taken.
Yeah, and this idea that he said he wanted to keep it quasi-real. The character was absurd. There was nothing real about the character. I mean, except for you saying, we know that, what the paradigm, I guess is the word, or what they were parodying. I can't ever say that. Parodying.
That's right. You got it.
But it was still a parody, Dana.
Oh,
we love you, but come on. All right. Hey, and finally in 1980s news, we've got several Ghostbusters Afterlife sequel updates.
Whoop.
Earlier this year at CinemaCon, Sony shared footage from the set of the new Ghostbusters movie. It featured the director Gil Kenan, Jason Reitman, who's a writer and producer, as well as the core rest of the cast from Afterlife that are coming over to the new film. And they were dressed in the uniforms. And the video revealed that they would be, quote, living under one roof in New York at the Ghostbusters firehouse. So it makes sense that just a Ghostbusters Day on June 8th, the official Ghostbusters account reminded us on Twitter that the code name of the new film is Firehouse. Now, we had seen this in an image from March on a set photo. It was on the, was that called
the clapboard?
The
clapboard. Yep.
The slate, how they slate the films. It was on there, but now they've said it official. It's code name Firehouse. Whether that's the real title or it's the working title like Blue Harvest was for Star Wars or Rust City was for Ghostbusters Afterlife, we don't know. But it just confirms how central that place is to the film.
I think it would be a great title. I mean, based on what we know from Afterlife, and we know that Winston is busy resurrecting the firehouse and stuff, and for that to be a central focus, I think I would be surprised if they change the name at this point. I bet they go with it because it's not a nebulous title like a Blue Harvest, right? It's actually, I think it applies really, really well.
And I wonder if there's some deeper meaning to it. And here's why I ask. Because while that seems pretty straightforward, it's curious that on the same day, Ghostbusters Day, that was just a week ago, Kenan, Reitman, and just about everybody that on the film helped reveal a teaser poster that they later sent out on their Twitter account that showcased a new take on the classic logo for the films. But this time, the ghost, the ghost that has the slash through it, the no ghost symbol,
right?
It seems frozen, like it has maybe ice, like it almost seems like it's in motion flying.
Right.
And the ice is sort of freezing as it...
Like icicles have frozen on it as it's hurtling toward the earth or something. Like the icicles are kind of going off at a 45-degree angle to the northeast of the logo. And I see where you're going with that. You're like, so is it a fire and ice situation? Is there some kind of spirit we're dealing with that has weather effects or something? which we haven't seen before or done before in the Ghostbusters universe. So that would be awesome.
Yeah. Is it some sort of icy threat that the antidote is fire? So we get it from the firehouse. Yeah. Now, of course, the firehouse, this potentially titular firehouse, isn't a firehouse for the Ghostbusters, a repurposed firehouse as far as the story goes. Sorry, I feel like I'm going to burp. Thank you.
Hey, it's an all dude show. Just burp on the mic. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, yeah.
You don't have to wait.
It's going to pick up and fart.
I've been doing that all through the show. SBD.
Yeah. SBD.
Not to be confused with a
BBL.
BBL. Totally different. Now, wait. They both do cause vibrations, but that's totally different, the causality.
Now I feel like I have to leave me burping in the show just to get that all in there so Kat can learn some things.
You may have to do a pickup burp and edit it in just to make this all make sense.
I'm gonna where I get the woman orgasm sounds. They may have a guy burping for 10 minutes.
A 10-minute burp. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. 10 frames.
So speaking of firehouses, just a few days later, after Ghostbusters Day, that is, Reitman shared a new Instagram story in which he appears outside Tribeca's Hook and Ladder 8, which is since the original film has played the exterior of the Ghostbusters headquarters there in New York City. It's a real location. It's a functioning firehouse.
So I'm going to ask you a virtually rhetorical question.
Yes.
You've been there, right?
Yes.
Of course you have. I just make sure. It's a mecca. If you go to Manhattan, you have to go.
Yeah. So you've gone as well because you're a huge fan of Ghostbusters.
Certainly. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The first time you go, it's a little disappointing because first, it's not the Ghostbusters scene, right? It's not the set anymore. It's a working firehouse, as you said. And it's so much smaller than you think it's going to be. Because it's in our minds, it's the Ghostbusters headquarters, right? It may as well be a Avengers Tower, but it's this little 2 or 3 story right on the corner of a block. Like it doesn't even take up even, I don't know, 1,000 square feet floor ground space. It's not much. Yeah, it's really small.
Yeah, it's a tiny city block.
Yeah.
Where I used to live in New Jersey, in Jersey City, is right outside the Holland Tunnel. And one way to get to the Holland Tunnel, I would just, when I was downtown, I would just cut, the Holland Tunnel's downtown, I guess. But depending where I was, I would cut right in front of that firehouse, almost every time. So whenever I was with somebody who'd never been in New York before, I would, pause there. Point it out.
No big deal. Ghostbusters
and
right
then,
there.
Keep driving, Yeah, so he was outside that, and maybe because the Ecto one has been spotted racing through the New York City streets over, again, during that week of Ghostbusters Day, doing second unit filming, it seems, and given the fact that Reitman was there, maybe he was there to assist, somehow, maybe direct some of that production or not. Finally, while the Tribeca Firehouse has served as the exterior of the Ghostbusters headquarters since the first film in 1984, as I mentioned, a recent video shared by Grace McKenna on TikTok shows off the set of the interior of the station.
Yep.
And it's a set.
Yep.
And wow, it looks identical to the decommissioned Los Angeles fire station, which I think is number 23, that served as the inside of the headquarters when they shot the original films.
Yeah, I think I might have last week or so. I think I might have sent you that TikTok from McKenna Grace because it's more than just the interior. The interior is amazing. The exterior is amazing. But she's dancing around to some, I'm sure, trendy TikTok song that I don't recognize, but she's running around and she's lip syncing to it. I'm like, sure, whatever. But it's probably DaBaby or somebody I don't know. Anyway, she's out there running around and the streets and the asphalt and the cracks in the asphalt. It's a full city, the intersection on the corner there is what they've recreated. And but for the big sheets of green on the wall of the interior of the warehouse, you would not know you were not downtown in Manhattan.
When I first saw it, I thought, they're filming in Los Angeles again at that fire station, because I know it's still there.
Right.
There's been some controversy about what to do with it over the last several years. Most recently, they were, I want to say it was about 5 years ago, they were going to turn it into a youth arts center there in Los Angeles. And then that never happened. At one point, it was going to be demolished. At one point, it should be preserved. It's been used in a lot of films, including many from the 1980s. Well, at least a handful. And you'll recognize it as Egg Shen's home in Big Trouble in Little China. It's the inside of the Ghostbusters fire station.
Really? I did not know that.
When you look at it now, you're like, oh yeah, because you see the iconic big arch doors. That's how they get in there. Why was I saying all of that? Oh, but yeah, so to see it in there, to your point, when she comes out of it, oh, right, this is a sound stage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Holy cow. And yeah, even when she rounds that corner, it's like, oh, I was imagining it was just going to be more street going there because it seemed like
right.
They'll add it in later.
And doesn't it bode well for the franchise in general, but this film in particular, that could have all been CGI.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Or it could have all been on one of those digital Disney Mandalorian projection sets. It could have done all that there. But somebody decided that Ghostbusters needs to be grounded enough in reality that they're going to build a large portion of it.
Yeah, it's got to be Reitman because, as you know, Afterlife, he did a lot of that too. On location, they used maquettes or puppets when they, in animatronics as much as they could on set for the creatures. A lot of that was in camera. And thank goodness, because I remember the comment he made at the time was he's going to make it much like his father made it in the 1980s as he could, as practically could. Sony, by the way, has been building out its Ghostbusters universe. We've also got an animated feature and an animated series in the works.
Really?
This sequel, whether it's going to be called Firehouse or something else, is due to come out. Again, this is shocking. December 20th this year, not to 2024, this year. I can't believe that. But.
It's got to slip. It's got to slip. There's no way.
Yeah, I don't know.
Christmas is a good time to release a film, but look, they could say Christmas 2024 and I would be, it wouldn't sound irrational based on the time it takes to get these things done.
And I wouldn't feel like that's too long to wait. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. It makes sense to get it done and I'm fine. I could wait that long.
I mean, I'm okay with it being this year. Totally fine, but
It's
surprising.
I don't know. Yeah. I might not be ready. Do you ever have this experience? I've had this experience a few times. I can't give you a specific movie, but where I saw a movie all of a sudden that I wanted to see. Like usually it's, hey, you want to go at this certain day or then we'll figure out a time. All right. So then I know 24 hours in advance. And I've also done last minute, hey, you want to go see a movie? But there's been some times where if I see the movie at an unexpected time, all of a sudden, and usually it's someone else's, hey, you want to go? I'm going to see that, Batman. You want to go see Batman? Yeah, sure. That when I see it, it seems like a dream. Like I'm not mentally prepared. I think my body must otherwise do this thing where I'm like, I prepare ahead of time. Now I'm ready to receive the information on Thursday at 7:30. That comes. I'm ready. Give me the information.
It never never occurred to me to get a handle on it the way you have. But yes, I've had that feeling before. It's almost as if you need to format that part of your brain to then receive the data for the film.
Yes.
And if you go and see it without having been formatted, then you just, you get it on a floppy disk and later you'll be ready to internalize it and think about it. And maybe not till you see it again the next time, right? Maybe.
Right.
Because I'm not prepared to receive this data yet. Like there's no place to store it. Even just a day. You like, want to see the movie tomorrow? Yeah. I went to see The Little Mermaid with my best friend when it first came out. Literally, it's like we were sitting around after school and we're like, what do you want to do? I don't know. Have you seen The Little Mermaid yet? No. Oh, let's go now. And we had to go fast to get there because it was we got there and there was no one else in the theater and they were about to not show it because no one showed up and we were the only two in the theater. And I still cannot remember watching the movie. It was more the experience of going and sitting there and like nobody else is here. And it was so weird. And that was back when theaters were always full, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I saw it again on video that I really remember watching it and capturing the movie. So I never quantified it as... Yeah, it's definitely a thing I've experienced.
You're right. And part of that hurrying to get there and just making it, or you get there after it starts, which really upsets me.
Oh,
I almost zone out after that.
I'll just leave. If I miss the beginning, I'll just leave. Yeah.
If I'm with people, then I can't. But if I was by myself, I would, But yeah. Oh, all right, cool. So I'm not crazy. All right. Hey, that was 1980s news. That's why this whole podcast exists.
Because you're not crazy?
To make sure I'm not feeling crazy. Yeah.
Okay.
So right now, let's talk about, I was going to say something that I thought was going to make it sound like a bigger deal than it is. But look, Kat's still not here. She hasn't shown up. So maybe we should have been playing it like she's late this whole time and we could call her throughout. Kat, where are you?
It's just going to voicemail. She's not answering.
No. I did notice, however, she's messaging you.
Oh, yeah.
While we're doing the show. And she knows we're doing the show right now.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly why she's doing it. Because she knows she can distract us by messaging us. Yeah.
What?
In fairness, she said she was gonna. So.
Oh, she did?
Oh, yeah.
Now I remember. You're right. Let's talk about some fictional role models from whenever. Now, obviously, some of them may be from the 1980s, and that's fine. But and maybe I'm making this, I don't want to say I'm making an exception, because I feel like lately on last several episodes, I don't try to hold us tightly to the 1980s if it bleeds out before or after. I told this story about a saxophone that started in the 1840s.
Right. Well, it's a thread that ran through the 80s, so it counts.
But let's talk about some of the folks in fictional work that influenced our behavior. And is she messaging again, or is that you? That's you, isn't it? I could see you typing. I want to see what you wrote. Dang it. Am I boring you guys? It can't be boring, Kat. So, I'll tell you what, let's talk about some examples first. And then I did do some, because I like to do some nerdy reading, and I found some interesting things that some smarter people than me. The good news for you is it doesn't even take up a whole page. So there you go. Got that going.
We'll fill it with our commentary. No problem.
So one of the first times I remember feeling influenced by a character. Now, look, first of all, this is not to detract from our actual male role models in our lives. We don't have to get into that. My dad doesn't listen to my show, so I'm not too worried about it. Seems like my mom might. I don't know that she would tell him, but she might tell him something if she's mad and wants to hurt his feelings, maybe. Do you know what Will said on his podcast? I don't know. But certainly my father had an influence on the person that I ultimately
Of course,
became. Yeah. But in addition to that, and maybe it was easier because I spent more time watching television shows and having these kinds of chats with my father, it seemed like my earliest influences, I'm talking about, less than 2 digits year old. So, maybe, 5, 6 years old, 7, 8 years old, were superheroes.
Really? Okay.
Adam West, or should I say Batman? Batman's the character. So Batman, as portrayed though by Adam West.
Bruce Wayne then, or Batman? Is it which, or was it both?
More Batman, I think, for this reason. I'm talking about the 1966 television series, of course, is that the thing that really stuck with me is how analytical he was. I loved and was fascinated by how they would try to piece together, the mystery of the show. And I know it was campy, but mystery of the show, and use computers and logic and reasoning to solve these ridiculous puzzles.
Yeah.
I do see early on, and later on there'd be other characters that I got into that did that sort of thing, and I still love murder mysteries to this day. But there's something that in other characters you're going to see a through line that made me, I think, a more intellectually curious person in the way they had to investigate these things. I don't think I'm reaching either. It sounds like maybe I'm stretching for content. I'm not. Seriously, I remember these sort of making these connections, or now making this connection based on how I remember feeling when I was a kid.
Right. Like you might not have been able to articulate that back then, but looking back now, you can see that's why it had that impact on you.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah. I think if I were a different generation, maybe it would have been Columbo, if I were a little bit older.
Oh, so whoever might be
that
that analytical kind of problem solver. Yeah, I guess I can see it. There are a few that I would pick, and they're all for different reasons, really. And so the first one is, I guess, is not a fictional character, but it's everything he portrayed is what kind of was, it informed me and helped. Let's stop hiding what it is. Steve Martin is who I'm thinking about, right?
Yep.
And I can't think of a particular role he's played, but isn't he always kind of the same guy in everything he does, whether he's in his stand-up or he's this aloof, goofy, a little bit bumbling, out of his element, sort of whatever he always plays. Think of him in The Jerk. Think of him in My Blue Heaven. Think of him in anything. And I think it was, and it couldn't have been just any comic or comedian. I think it was because he always came out on top and he embraced his goofiness and his nuttiness. And I was always an atypical kid. And I've stayed an atypical adult. I mean, from my musical tastes to my things I find funny to, and all of that. And the people I grew up with were the kids I grew up with. They were not accepting of that kind of, you live inside of your little bubble, pre-internet, and here's the norm. And I wasn't the norm. And so you felt weird about it, right? But I saw Steve Martin. I'm like, well, that dude is like, I want to be that dude. Not that I wanted to be a professional comedian or a professional actor or whatever, but the roles that he played took what I knew to be his genuine nuttiness and he used it to his advantage. And I always felt that, not because of anything he did or said as a problem solver or detective, as you said, but just in the way that he didn't care if he came across as being the oddball or the misfit. And it empowered me to eventually find a way to not be ashamed by my own misfittedness or whatever word I just made up. Can you see that? Does any of that ever resonate for you?
He's on my list.
He's on your list.
He's on my list for the same reason. And I'll give you a specific example because, again, this resonated with me, and I'm jumping around chronologically, and that's fine. But the character of C.D. Bates in 1987's Roxanne, a film which he not only starred in, but he also wrote it.
Okay.
So I think you're right when you talk about how he, is as a person in real life could be reflected certainly most, closely probably by the characters he chooses not only to play, like in The Jerk, et cetera, and so on, but the ones he writes. And he wrote this film, and the scene in the bar where he takes down the guy who makes fun of his nose. Mm-hmm. He comes up with, I don't know what it is, he throws the dart to determine, he has the guy throw the dart to determine how many other clever ways he has to insult himself, that he could disarm that guy to show him, look, you can't hurt my feelings. And not only that, but I'm also more clever than you are. Yeah. So like you're saying, a way of finding how to turn what you felt uncomfortable or different, or that made you feel uncomfortable because you thought it was different, into a strength instead of a liability. Mm-hmm. And you're right, he does that in a lot of characters. And The Jerk's a good example too, because he's not aware of how, how much of an idiot he is.
Right. And the way that The Jerk is a wonderful example too, because he is unaware of how out of place he is, he forges ahead with it. He's not uncomfortable because he doesn't know to be uncomfortable. He doesn't know how fish out of water he is. And that is ultimately what makes him a success and makes him do well in all of his ventures, because he didn't know any better that he couldn't do it. He just was himself, and it all worked out. And people were stunned by that. They're like, well, he said what he was thinking. My God, it's like, that's great to know you can do that.
He hates these cans. And, along those lines too, because we could save on Steve Martin for another moment, because the other thing I think I learned from him is, or admired and sort of aspired to be is, and I think it's in the later films, certainly in like Roxanne and in LA Story, which came out in 90 or 91, is how he approached relationships. In Roxanne and in LA Story, he has this maturity about, the relationship he has, or the woman that he's interested in, sort of like what we were talking about earlier about the, attractive women, where he was attracted to strong women. Mm-hmm. They were not a threat. And also he knew it wasn't about him if they weren't interested. So if Daryl Hannah sleeps with the other character, he doesn't say, again, he's not slut shaming her. It's like, well, I understand why that happened, but I still like you. Yep. And we can still have a relationship. I get it. And similarly in, LA Story, the woman he's interested in is dating someone else, and that's fine. And, they just sort of, anyway. So his maturity about love.
He doesn't feel that he's lost. He just didn't win. Yeah. And that's a real distinction. There's one thing to lose. There's another thing to just have not won. And he had that sort of view on whatever was happening to him in a lot of his films. Yeah.
I'm going to take it back time-wise and also probably concept-wise. And again, a lot of these concepts, like I said about Batman, I was a young child. So my sort of understanding, or what I diluted Batman down into as far as moral lessons or things I would admired about the character, pretty simple and straightforward. Similarly, I want to say Superman and Clark Kent. I'm going to throw Clark Kent in there this time too. Okay. As played by Christopher Reeve in Richard Donner's Superman. The 1978 film and the sequel in 1980. One thing that always literally stuck out with me, because a lot of times, again, when you're a kid, if you admire a character in a movie, a TV show, a book, a song, it could be someone they're singing, when they say something that, it's like getting a lesson from your parents almost. So when Superman said to Lois Lane, "I never lie," I thought, well, I can't ever lie either then. That if Superman doesn't lie and I admire him, I'm not going to lie. I don't know how much lying I was doing then, but that became sort of like a tenet. Is that the word? For me, from that point forward, as far as, a barometer of my, how truthful I was being to myself, to other people.
Like an aspirational thing. You're like, well, I would like to be more like this superhero, which if that's not a role model, what is? You're mapping your behavior based on what you have learned or interpreted or felt through the portrayal of this character. Yeah, perfect.
And I'll actually lump Batman and Superman together. Yeah. It seems obvious, but as a kid, it's epitomized by that phrase we associate with Superman, which maybe it comes from the original TV show. I don't think it comes from the comics or Superman or Donner's films. Truth, justice, and the American way. Mm-hmm. That, again, you got truth in there, but justice. Both Batman and Superman had this hyper sense of justice. Right. Now, how it's portrayed, look, as an adult, you realize it's ridiculous. Like Superman literally captures criminals, ties them up, drags them to police officers, says these guys stole this boat. He drops the boat off. Mm-hmm. He didn't Mirandize anybody. It looks like he planted evidence. Those guys are getting off. They're not going to jail. Yeah. In reality, those guys are not going to jail.
Sure.
But as a kid,
in our show,
for me, again, it was this black and white sort of, there's good. Now, look, later on, you realize there's nuance and it's there's a more mature perspective. But early on, certainly, I had this hyper sense of justice that's still with me today. Now I temper it with maturity, but because I realize, it's not so simple. But
right. So I've got one for you. And now we enter the part of the show for Kat, because she's going to relate to this on some level, I'm sure.
All right, it's going to be a trucker. It's Conway Twitty.
It is a trucker. You guys,
it's not Conway Twitty?
No, he's a country singer. No.
Country singer.
So this is, and I like, rather than cheap out and just do another actor at all of his roles, I wanted to pick one and zero it in. And so, and I'm sure, I have no doubt it's because my dad was a trucker and he was such a powerful influence on me. But also, it's like a combination of my dad and Steve Martin in this character of Jack Burton.
I didn't even think of that. Right.
So in Big Trouble in Little China, Kurt Russell plays Jack Burton, and he is a no-nonsense, get-the-job-done truck driver, like my dad probably was, but he was also a wisecracker. And he was this probably. I'm really finding a lot of self-discovery in the course of doing this and realizing that he too was out of his element a lot, but he forged ahead. Like, imagine him throughout Big Trouble, where you have these crazy ninjas that are throwing lightning around and throwing their hats, and then you have these monsters, and then you have the Lopan with this lightning bolt hand, and he was just like, oh well, let's figure it out. Or he was just something goofy to deal with it. Almost, he was almost like the humorous equivalent of Indiana Jones shooting the guy with the sword, right? Let's find an atypical way to handle this that is complemented by my method of just kind of not give a fuckery. He's just kind of like, I'm a trucker and I'm going to handle this and it's my load. I'm going to get there on time. And he was embroiled in this thing. But the thing that I think I most reacted to, and you could say, oh, well, John, you just love the movie. That's why. And that doesn't hurt. Certainly, if I didn't like the movie, I would not have related to the character. But I think the movie is good because of his characterization here, what Kurt Russell does. And he breathes life into this character that otherwise could have been just one or the other. He just could have been a get-the-job-done trucker, or he could have been an incompetent wisecracker. But ultimately, he was both and neither. He was the best parts of both of those things. And it was absolutely what was needed to get the job done.
Right. That's perfect. Oh my gosh. And I see it's perfect for you, especially. But yes. And you hit on another one of mine because one of mine is Indiana Jones. And just a moment ago, for the same reasons you like Jack Burton, minus the humor part of it. But the same reason I also mentioned Clark Kent when I said Superman is Clark Kent and Indiana Jones both gave me early on this sense that I could be a nerd and still be super cool too.
Yes.
The most powerful man in the world was this, bumbling fool when he was, with glasses and, greased hair. And Indiana Jones, the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes is him, in this great adventure, getting the idol that the Belloc ultimately takes from him. And then cut to, he's got glasses and a, 3-piece, tweed suit on.
Yep.
Lecturing kids in a college.
Talking about archaeology, rambling about stuff, homework assignments, and everyone there is fawning over him, even though he's not being heroic at this moment, right?
Yes. Yeah. That didn't occur to me. I guess having the ladies interested in you. Yeah. And the guys too. But yeah, so the fact that there was that duality for me, was another, like you're talking about with Steve Martin, gave me permission to be more of what I felt like I naturally was.
I just had another epiphany. I hope I haven't interrupted your stream of thought, but Indiana Jones is a superhero too. And Dr. Jones is his alter ego. But when he becomes Indiana Jones, that's almost like he's putting on the cape, right? He's out there doing the adventures.
Right,
So it makes sense to me that you just mapped Batman and Superman and Indy, who is basically following the prototypical superhero model.
Yeah, you're right. Well, that didn't occur. I guess I got goosebumps. You're right. I didn't realize that was so transparent, but that's right.
Well, it didn't occur to me till we just laid it out like this, but no doubt. Holy crap.
Yeah. And they're almost, if you told a story about Indiana Jones and said, I think, isn't that you, Dr. Jones? Didn't you do that thing? Nobody would believe you.
Right. No, it's not the same guy.
No.
Certainly not.
Swinging across a chasm with a whip. No.
Right. Somebody somewhere is like, have you never noticed you don't see them together in the same place? Right.
Yeah. Right. But the other thing, the thing that's most similar to what you said about Jack Burton is that Indiana Jones doesn't know. This ties into everything I said about what I felt so far, and some of the things you said is he doesn't know how he's going to get the Ark, for example. but he knows he has to.
Right.
And so he has confidence in himself.
Perseverance.
Well, he doesn't perseverance and that sort of trust and faith that, and there's a line in Indiana Jones where he says, how are we going to get that done? I don't know.
I'm making this up as I go. That's right.
I go along.
Absolutely. Right.
And but he knew he had to try no matter what. So it was like that sense of justice of what had to be done and, confidence in himself to do it.
Will, I am loving this show. I did not know how this was going to go. I have gotten more personal insight in the last 30 minutes than I would have gotten from any therapy. But what it just occurred to me is something I learned from those characters that I don't want to attribute that all. Obviously, as you said, my parents and my friends and my group and everything influenced me. But something I learned from them that I have done for my entire adult life is just trust yourself. And that sounds super shallow and trite, but let me elucidate you a little bit on what I mean is that, for example, when I was a road warrior and I booked a hotel stay, if anyone else had booked my hotel before I got on the plane, I would go, well, let me check and see if actually I did book the right place in the right city and the right thing. But I've said to myself in the past, I'm going to trust last week, John. I'm going to trust that he was competent, that he did what he was supposed to do. I'm not going to double check him. I trust that guy because I know him, right? And then going forward, I remember when I left a long-time job to go contract somewhere, and I said, it's a contractor's thing. It's only for 6 months, but I'm going to double down on me and think that I am going to find a way to make myself indispensable. And then it worked out. Maybe it's because I willed it into being.
Yeah.
But it's that Indiana Jones kind of, I'll make it up as I go. I'm willing to take the leap of faith and believe that I could get there just on my own merits if I believe that I can. And I'm doing it right now, right? Where I lost my job a few months ago and I'm heavily investing in my ability to make content creation a sustainable thing. It's irrational and stupid and it's an absolute folly, but I believe it's possible and I'm willing to invest in what I think I can do, even though I'm going to make it up as I go, which is what I've been doing.
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. You make me think though that I think for me, the feelings that how you just describe yourself and that confidence that you have in yourself now, and that we maybe discovered first recognizing these characters that we're talking about, for me, they were aspirational for a good portion of my life. And there was ebbs and flows of strength. I think for me, I've only sort of in the last 5 years, maybe 10 years, could say I consistently believe in myself that, and consistently keep going after the arc, or stay on that journey. Whereas throughout the earlier few decades, it was, I'd lose that kind of, sight of the.
And I'm going to go one further and tell you, I'm still not confident. I still don't have any trust in my current self that I'm going to be able to accomplish these things. But I believe, like I said, I believe last week, John, that he did the right thing and I'll just trust that I'm in good shape. And I trust tomorrow, John, that he'll make the right decision no matter what happens today. I don't have confidence that I'm going to do the right thing, but I believe that I can figure it out when the next thing happens, when the next shoe drops, when the next twist comes.
Right.
And that's exactly this. Right back to Indy, right back to him. I don't know how I'm going to accomplish it. I don't know how I'm going to get on the submarine. Look, he got on a submarine that was diving. How did he get inside? That's ridiculous. Did he knock? Did he swim? Did he hold his breath? Point is, he worked it out. He had faith. Yeah. He took the leap. I'll figure out how to do it. Huge Raiders plot hole right there.
I always wondered about that.
Yeah.
He's just holding on to that periscope, right?
Yeah.
And that's the last
and they're all cheering. Yay, you're about to drown is all they're saying, right?
Right. That dude's dead. You know that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but cheer him on. Make him feel good about it.
Is he in the sub when they have the next scene? Or do we just see the sub arrives and he's now on
the next time we see him, he's like punching somebody and his hat flies up. So he gets the jacket that's too small. The sub is already docked. Like he just hung on like Aquaman the whole way. He's like a sucker on a whale. He just hung on and rode along. Yeah, I don't know.
He said he's a superhero. Yeah, I don't know.
That's fine. Yeah, he had his hat on, so it's superpowers. That's why it was different.
That's why he always has to get it back. You're right.
That's right. That's the source of his power. Right. So meta. Okay, I have another one that is not a superhero by any stretch of the imagination, but it is also, I'm channeling my inner cat here. It is also a truck driver, coincidentally.
I like how I named 2 superheroes and you named 2 truckers.
2 truck drivers, right? I don't know. Who knows why, but it is coincidentally, and I'm sure it has to do with the influence of my dad. And not just because he passed at an early age, but, well, damn, that's another insight that I just, ding, just kind of a bell hit me. Because I lost my dad early, these models these role models that I had somewhat mapped my father onto, they continued after he was gone. And so I was able to, almost like I was able to continue to learn from my dad through these characters that I attributed to be dad-like.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
Absolutely, 100%.
Because I lost my dad when I was 18, I think. Yeah, it was way too soon. Wait, I was not fully a man yet. I needed more input. But so it's Bandit from, he's a trucker in that he's in a truck driving movie, right? So Burt Reynolds plays Bandit.
That whole film feels like a trucker movie.
It is. It's all about it. There's plenty of stuff going on, and it really is just the fun that Bandit got out of life, despite what was going on around him. Yes, he was involved in a truck driving movie. I'm sure that, again, that's mapped because of the correlation with my family, but he was, and I think I told you before, because I so closely correlate that film with my dad, that I've not rewatched the film since he passed. Just, I don't know if I can. It's just, there's too much there. But what I remember of it from 20 some odd years ago, 30 some odd years ago, it's just so, I just think of him with that goofy Burt Reynolds, goofy laugh, right? He's talking on the CB and he's picking up Sally Field and they're going balls to the wall. There's no coincidence that when I was able to pick my vehicle, the first vehicle I got after my piece of junk pickup was a Pontiac Firebird. Not an accident. It had a big, it was a white car with a big blue Firebird on the hood, right? It was just, and it was the Bandit. It was that car in my mind. It wasn't anywhere near that car. 6-cylinder automatic transmission. Point is, I had the Bandit's car, but Burt Reynolds in that role, everything that's happening in the film, he is nonplussed. He is always finding a way to win, to beat out the sheriff that's after him, but he's having a good time and he's finding joy despite the adversity that's going on. And that's something that until we were preparing for this show, that I had to do a little introspection to find out, are there characters that I've mapped that way? And I've definitely picked up on that. Even if things are going horrible, I'm going to find a way to enjoy it. I'm going to gamify it. What do you have to do? I have to do all these dishes. Well, I'm going to make it a game and find a way that I can stack them just right and get the most in there, like I'm playing Tetris. Always finding a way to really get the most out of it. Even if it's not pleasurable, find pleasure in it for yourself. And that's what I learned, I think from him. I mean, lots of places, but that's the one that I can most kind of point to.
Gosh, you just made me realize something, and I don't even know if I keep this in the show, but
okay.
Well, you're talking about how your dad, the connection between your dad and a lot of the characters, and specifically with the Bandit. In some of the characters, one of the characters, well, maybe all these characters, they're somehow related to something I admired about my dad, but the characters themselves had something I wished he also had. Oh. So almost like you're saying, you had this opportunity to continue to get lessons from your father in a sense. I was creating or adopting myself to, I don't know how you say, the opposite of getting adopted. I was casting these fictional characters as a quasi parental figure in that regard, in the way that I felt my dad lacked.
It's almost like you were weird sciencing together a potential, I don't want to say perfect, but all the best pieces. Like I want, this trait and this characteristic and this personality together to kind of build this parental model, or not quite that? Not
quite that, in the sense that I didn't see it as a Frankenstein's monster. And I didn't see a whole, I wasn't creating something that was whole. It was really at that moment, this is the thing. So this moment it's Indiana Jones. I'll give you a better example. My father raised me to be very logical, and he admired the character of Spock on Star Trek. Talking about original series, and I did too. And I most thought of my father like that, and admired that about him. But my father could also, because he was straight out of Vietnam. I was born within a year of him being out of Vietnam, or essentially I think a year, 2 years. And so he still wrestles with these things today. But so in addition to being cold and logical the way Spock could, and my father very rational and analyze something like Batman, but without the emotion, my father could also have the complete opposite and be very emotional and upset and those things. So for me, my example is I focus on Spock because it carves out that other part that, is, for me at the time as a kid, is troubling. So I admire Spock, And I aspire to be Spock because he has the things about my dad that I love, minus that one thing that could scare me as a little kid.
Oh shit, Will, more goosebumps. Because what more do we know about Spock?
Yeah.
He's not emotionless.
Right.
He's half human and half Vulcan. He has that in him.
Yeah.
He can be incredibly violent if he lets his guard down, if he is not able to contain his human side.
Right.
And we saw it in the original series some. We saw, during Ponfar, he absolutely becomes mindless and rages. And it's because 99% of the time he controls that in himself.
Right.
It's not that he doesn't have it. Like, I don't know if you realized this when you were a kid thinking about Spock as that, as a more polished and more refined version of those traits you liked in your dad, that you can control that. But that's exactly what Spock was doing through Leonard Nimoy's portrayal, is saying he's not emotionless.
Right.
It's simmering underneath the surface, and he is absolutely using all the will he has, and flawlessly most of the time,
right,
to control it, stay calm, cool, and not allow that to come out or that to manifest.
Right. Holy shit.
It fits even more.
It's crazy. I didn't think of it that way as a kid. What instead I did was I retconned my experience or relationship with my father and just made it like, oh, Spock and my dad, they're just basically the same. They're similar. Ignoring certain aspects of my dad, but not realizing, like you're suggesting, because we watched all of Star Trek, that I would have known that about him.
Spock has those too. Yeah.
Except he did a better job, and I would want that from my
Just
father.
a better job.
Yeah.
Right.
Holy shit. I'm canceling my therapy tomorrow.
Maybe in hindsight, the only part that you were hoping your dad might have had was better control over it with the logical powers.
Oh my God. 1,000,000%.
It was all there.
You're absolutely right.
It was all there the whole time.
I think we could wrap this up. And what I want to say, because now I've had so many revelations that I didn't expect to have, especially that last one. Thank you for that. Of course, perfect, since you're a Star Trek expert. The good news is, I suppose, is, look, we're talking about, we're in our 50s now, and it's been a journey, and it continues. The journey continues. What I want to say is, the good news is, and I can only speak for myself, with regard to how I chose I connected with these folks and their certain traits that I identified, admired, aspired to have. And then thinking about my relationship with my father, and maybe what I learned from him as well, is this sort of synthesis of all these things made me focus on and determined to be the best part of all those things. I had a choice. I had a choice. Right. I had enough models to make decisions. And I guess gratefully, and I want to say I thank my father for this. And, of course, not to say anything against my mother, my whole family, friends, is for whatever reason had the insight to choose the best parts of these characters and people,
Yeah. That's just going back to trusting past and future Will.
Yeah.
Because apparently he knew what he was doing. So
yeah,
you can have faith that he'll probably know what he's doing tomorrow, like I do for future John.
And to him, I say, keep on trucking.
How appropriate. Truckers. Yeah, keep on trucking.
So we did ask folks for their fictional role models from the 1980s, and we did get some responses. Brad says somewhere between Han Solo, Ferris Bueller, John Cryer, Pretty in Pink, John Cryer, he specifies, and Christian Slater, and Pump Up the Volume.
That's a totally different subset of characters.
Yes, you're right. There's no overlap in those.
Yeah, I'm having trouble mapping them all directly to Brad, but I obviously respect his choices. That's that's his feeling. But I think the more I get to know Brad, the more I'll understand that probably.
Ted just attached a GIF of a slimed Peter Venkman, which it reminds me that when I spoke to Hadley Freeman, the author of so many great articles and books, as I look around for her book here, Life Moves Pretty Fast, where she talks about various characters in films and what she sort of learned from them, I suppose. She cites Peter Venkman as a good male role model, which I thought was surprising because he's, on surface level, he seems kind of sexist, etc. But she makes a great argument.
Not only that, he's all about himself. He doesn't care about anyone else, other than ultimately having some commitment to his friends and colleagues. If pressured, he's kind of it's all about me kind of guy.
I will not be able to explain it how she does, but every chapter is a different character, and therefore those traits, and she examines. That's one of them. Anyway, Craig writes, I was just thinking how often I'd watch Indiana Jones. There you go. Movies in the 80s.
There you go.
And grew up into an academic librarian who loves to research ancient cultures, drink whiskey, study dead languages, and who thinks the world would be a better place if we just punched more Nazis.
There you go. All you need is a fedora and you are a superhero. That's it. You're almost there.
Yes.
That's where your power comes from. It's like the radioactive spider for Indiana Jones. That's all he needed.
Yes, and I just need Craig to bite me. Then I could be one too. Scott writes,
Did you just tell Craig to bite you? Is that what you just said?
Bite me, Craig.
That's unkind.
Scott writes Officer John Baker and Officer Frank Poncherello. And I think is he trying to test us like we don't know who that is?
Yeah, perhaps.
Probably, maybe not.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure.
And why was there even a P in CHIPS since patrol is already part of the patrol? It's like ATM machine.
California Highway Patrol.
California Highway Patrol. And it was called CHIPS Patrol.
Oh, what?
Right?
I didn't realize that. Okay, yeah, that's dumb.
So the acronym is California Highway Patrol, CHIPS Patrol. But then patrol is already in the acronym.
Right.
It's just like ATM machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, they're kind of two sides of the same coin, though, aren't they? The two guys from
Baker
CHIPS.
and
I mean,
Poncherello. I
having
think so,
those two together. I mean, they were partners, which there's already something amazing to pull. As a male, as a man, to see two men have brotherly love for one another, like any pair of detectives or policemen or whatever. I think that's a powerful set of role models to have just in general.
Yeah. And a little more as of an era where it was clear, like, good guys wear white, bad guys wear black, it was sort of not a lot of gray in those 80s TV shows.
Yeah.
Michael attached a gif of Marty McFly playing the guitar, kind of a youthful, adventurous spirit, I think. Another guy who's definitely heads down. I got to accomplish a certain thing no matter what. Christopher wrote, better yet, be the Terminator. That might have even been a response to Michael posting Marty McFly. I wasn't sure. And Jack Merritt 22, I think this is from Twitter, wrote Michael Keaton in Night Shift. There you go. What was the thing he says?
Edible paper.
Note to self. Right.
Two interesting observations that I just made. The first is that neither of us nor any of our listeners pointed to any of the beefcakes, right? The Stallones and the Schwarzeneggers and the thing, except for Terminator that just came up, which I think was maybe a bit of a lark there, but that's not what we resonate with. We wanted to see that. We wanted to see people be that, but I don't think we saw ourselves in that, nor did it necessarily. We'd much rather be the John McClane than the John Connor. You know what I mean? It's like there's two different worlds kind of thing. You know what I mean from Terminator. And the point is, and the other one that I thought of is that what kind of role models would there have been in a parallel universe in 1960s now, that podcast? Would that have been your John Waynes and your, I don't know who all, these people that for us didn't resonate with us because partially we didn't see them. They were in films that were not ones we were watching or shows, but they're just as viable as role models that people were getting, but they didn't have a venue to talk about those male role models that they had because there was no podcasting back in the 1980s.
I think you're right. It would have been different. And I think you're right. The sort of John Wayne as an archetype of what we would have been exposed to. And I realized I didn't share any of my smart, nerdy, wonky stuff that I read about, and you remind me of it because very briefly, what I found interesting was two things. One, I found an article that was written in 1988 that was analyzing what role models were in film that literally that week. And the author of the article points to the fact that the film's out and thereby the role models that we have are from Big, Crocodile Dundee 2, and Bull Durham. And she, and ultimately what's interesting to me is that I realized that, and thinking about our machismo episode from last year, is that by the end of the 1980s, we had a different male role model. Because even though she ultimately, she takes issue with some of the aspects of these various characters I just mentioned to you, what they have in common is a more sense of vulnerability. Crocodile Dundee, even to some aspects, certainly, as compared to an earlier, say, Arnold Schwarzenegger character, or Sylvester Stallone, is more emotionally available. Certainly the 14-year-old child is because he's a kid aside. But what she points to as sort of the epitome of, maybe a good role model at the time and sort of where we headed and where we're arriving is the Kevin Costner character in Bull Durham. Yeah. Because, again, this is a running theme too. The woman he's attracted to, played by Susan Sarandon, is, sexually experienced, is independent, is strong-willed, is, level-headed. All these things that, maybe were... left aside earlier as far as, female archetypes in film, just for the femme fatale or the, the ingenue.
Sure.
So as maybe the female characters were getting more sophisticated towards the end of the 80s, so were the male characters because he's not threatened by that. He himself is emotionally vulnerable. Anyway, I thought that was interesting to your point about this compared to the 60s. I don't think we had starting evolved maybe to the end of the 80s.
Well, I'm certain depending on which decade people grew up in, they're going to have their own subset of these types of role models. And because of the different eras we lived in, there could be very different reasons most likely too.
Yeah.
I mean, most likely someone from the 60s who absolutely loved John Wayne is probably because of his machismo, because of his how he handled women, because of how he handled other people. That would not be something that we would aspire to today necessarily, but was absolutely middle of the road, expected, and possibly top of the heap for men back then.
Yeah, and I found, a sort of bookends to what you're saying. We're creating bookends for the decade and also this conversation. Talked about the end of the 1980s, sort of we arrived. And to your point about the 1960s, I found this other interesting piece that was written at the beginning of the 1980s by an English professor who was saying, he started a male, what do you call it? His paper's called Modern Men or Men's Studies in the 80s. He created a men's studies class because he had talked about certainly throughout the 70s and maybe back in the 60s and maybe beyond, there were female studies, women's studies classes. And part of it was to write which was perceived as a wrong, and probably rightly so, the perception of women in the sense that they were, sort of harnessed, I think he keeps saying, they were basically stereotyped in real life in particular roles.
Sure.
Housemaker, housewife, mother, caregiver, those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, we should definitely do something to make things more egalitarian. That's why it's important to have these women's studies classes. But what he points out is, and I thought was interesting, is that he said, we don't have men's studies classes. And men may very well be victims of the same thing, where they're expected to be macho and strong and providers and not have emotion, these kinds of things. And weren't allowing, at least certainly in pop culture and media, et cetera, because we weren't having a dialogue about it, for men to evolve in the way that he suggests we were already doing.
And that's the double standard. If we sign up, attend, go to, and even get a grade in a men's study class, wussies.
Yeah.
Right? Just be a man. Just be, just man up, just deal with it. And there's introspection is not typically a trait that is admired in men.
It's so silly, right? I mean, it's so silly. And yeah. And I guess where do these, I don't know, now we're going off topic, but I guess to leave it there, like you pointed out, our listeners and you and I, again, we navigated this somehow and chose the right role model. Look, when we say male role models, even though we're saying it from a gender perspective, we can say that, I suppose, because we identify as male. But the traits we talked about and the traits we talked about for women, they're good for everybody, anybody.
Certainly. Right. It's just that when those traits are in men, I don't find them attractive. That's the difference.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I mean, Will,
fair enough.
You're a good looking guy. I just don't feel that way. It's nothing fair personal.
Enough. Hey, if you're not attracted to me, then, I mean, you're not going to be attracted to anyone.
There's nothing. I got nothing, right? That's the best. Yes. I don't know. Although Anson Mount.
Oh yeah. Hey, I get that.
Okay.
All right. Hey, on that note, before John Anson mounts, that was our show. And our show was brought to you in part by our early adopters, Kathy Burke, Rick Parker, and Karen Flieger. I apologize for saying your names in the order on which they're written in the paper and not trying to scramble them up as I went along.
You can't out-cat the cat. Do it your own way.
That's right. And a special thanks to our Secret of Our Success level Patreon supporters, John Henderson, Greg Coletta, Marcus Taylor, Tony Great, Brad Bowman, and Nick Guillory.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, I've got some other stuff. We could read it next time. Some comments or whatever. Anyway, but I'll just say this. Hey, if you have an opportunity to do so and you can, please support the show any way you can, making comments, subscribing, sharing posts, or go to 1980snow.com/support to find out how you give us literally $1. And that's it. Never give us any more money. Or give us some amount of money on a routine basis, recurring basis.
That's preferable.
Yes. Yes. All right. Hey, that's it. We will talk to you with Kat. We will talk to you next time on 1980s Now.
Hasta la vista.
This podcast is part of the 80s Ruled Network. Visit the 80s Ruled on Facebook for more 1980s awesome.